So, I am so excited today because I have with me two amazing humans who are responsible for making me laugh now on a weekly basis. My walk to town when I walk on a Sunday to go and teach has never been so exciting as when I came across a fabulous podcast by these two wonderful humans. The podcast in question is Talk Tull to Me. And my regular viewers on my live stream know that I do mention it quite often because it's just wonderful. And I've been meaning to get in touch with these guys for so long. And when I did, straight away they got back to me and went, yeah, let's have a conversation. So that is what we're going to do today. We're going to have a little conversation and just share some stuff around well, what they do and what I do, and hopefully just get to know each other a bit and introduce maybe our audiences to each other. So for those who don't know me, I'm Claire Holdich. I'm a flute player, musician, and most of my audience online know me from my YouTube channel, where I make covers of all sorts of stuff: pop music, film music, TV music, all sorts of things, including some of the music by the fabulous Jethro Tull, which is what binds us together, me and my guests today, really. So as I said, it's so exciting to speak to these guys and get to know them, and just to share a love of Tull, really. So Omen, Nick, hello.
Hello, Claire. Thank you so much for having us. I'm Omen Thomas Sade.
I am Nick Magill.
Together we are Feckless Momes.
And we represent Talk Tull to Me. I mean, we are Talk Tull to Me.
You are.
And this is a super exciting crossover episode collaboration hybrid, like when you mix an orchid with a Venus flytrap. Yes, polar bear.
Maybe let's not discuss who is who in that little hybrid there.
Yeah.
No.
Thank you so much for having us, Claire. It was
thank you for being here with me. It's honestly, I've just been so excited about this.
The reason that we got so excited that you contacted us and that we get to have a conversation is because you represent something that neither Nick or I have any of, which is expertise in any field. One of the things we always say on the podcast is on Talk Tull to Me is that we just like Jethro Tull, and I think, like a lot of Tull fans, had the experience of not really being able to talk about it with anybody else, and so we kind of that a community around that has formed. But you actually have a skill, which is playing the flute, which is something that's amazing.
Well, thank you. It's and that's how I've really come to Tull as a flute player, and really I'm quite a relatively new Tull fan. I've been playing the flute for a long time, and was schooled in the classical method, but I've always been a fan of all sorts of music, and when I really kind of started to really listen to their stuff and just discovered how wonderful it was like, it was so liberating. And then to just have a go at playing it as well has just been like, oh wow. And then to discover other people who are just as passionate about their music still now is wonderful. So yeah, it's just great.
So here's the big question we like to ask whenever we get people writing in. This is super, super fun to hear everybody's story. What is your Tull jumpstart? What was your first exposure to Tull?
Do you know, I don't even know if I can answer that. I don't really know. I mean, I'd probably heard,
for legal reasons, obviously.
Yeah. I think I'd heard bits and bobs over the years, but I'd just never, if I'm really honest, the flute in pop songs was this thing. It was like, oh, sometimes a flute pops up in pop songs, and it was like, yeah, whatever. And I can't honestly remember what really made me go, no, do you know what? I'm going to really dig into this and listen to it. And yeah, I honestly can't really remember where I started. But when I kind of did realize, oh my God, this is amazing, I was like, right, I'm going to start at the beginning and kind of go through. So had a bit of a dabble with This Was, but then it was stand up really that really got me like hooked.
Sure.
So I kind of
yeah.
began, and even now I've not listened to the whole catalogue. I'm just hands in the air, like I've not got there because
So-
I get one album out and I'm like, oh, this is the best thing ever, and then I don't want to move on to the next one.
That definitely parallels an experience that I've had, and Nick, you and I have talked about this a little bit. That when you really fall in love with the Tull album, sometimes it's hard to move on to the next one because the sound can shift so much album to album.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think it's a common Tull skull experience to listen to a new album and listen to it once and kind of go, oh God, what was that? And then you listen to it a couple more times and you get acclimated to the new sound.
That's the experience, I think, in this podcast as well. I mean, we are in the smack in the middle of recording episodes for Under Wraps, and neither of us is terribly familiar with Under Wraps, but boy, do we like it now.
Yeah.
After like these deep dives and really having to listen to it so precisely.
And I think that's what's amazing about one of the things that's amazing about the music is you have to dig into it, don't you?
Yeah.
And I suppose in some ways that does parallel with classical music in that it takes a little bit of effort to get in and get in there and really understand it. And this is why listening to your podcast is so amazing, because it gives you the chance to do that, to really take the time and dive in a way that, I mean, I wouldn't do, because I'm always coming at it from a music point of view. So it's the music that's brought me in, and it's the music that I pick up on more than the lyrics, where you guys really dive into the lyrics, which is fantastic, because I've learned so much about the music that I thought I already knew quite a lot about from exploring it from a lyric point of view. But yeah, you're dead right about each album having its own feel, and I can completely understand why people say, oh well, I like this album, or I like this era of Tull, or I like this, because they are so radically different, aren't they? I have to say, Under Wraps, I have kind of jumped forward in my exploring the catalogue and went to Under Wraps because I was so intrigued to see how that album was done. As somebody who's producing their own stuff, I was like, this is the whole album, with the program drums and everything. I was like, oh, I'm really keen to listen to this, because what did they do?
One thing that's been fascinating that neither of us expected is that through looking at the music of Jethro Tull over the 50 years that they've been playing has really led us to a historical exploration of the music industry, recording technology, music technology. If you look back at This Was or Stand Up, and the way that was recorded versus the way that the most recent Tull album, the kind of surprise that nobody saw coming, the Zealot Gene, which came out just this past year, that was recorded essentially like what we're doing now. It was recorded during quarantine. Ian sent out scratch tracks to all the musicians. They played their bits, and then it was remastered in a separate location.
And Ian ended up just doing pretty much half of the album on his own as well. Yeah.
And how wonderful is the album because of that mixture, that complete mixture of full out produced tracks and then the acoustic stuff. I mean, it's just wonderful. I've heard him say that he thinks it turned out a lot better because of the situation that they were working with, which is amazing, really.
And it represents, the history of the moment that it was created. Now, speaking of history and going all the way back to the origin of some of this stuff, I'm wondering, as a flautist, are you familiar with Rahsaan Roland Kirk?
Yes.
Amazing.
Crazy man. Crazy.
Yeah. I wanted to kind of see because we only really know of him in the way that he inspired Ian Anderson and that playing style. But I was wondering if if you had any kind of perspective on Kirk and kind of flute wise what that represents.
Well, I think that if we're talking about flute specifically, I think what probably was a massive advantage for him was that he played all these different instruments. So I mean, he's a saxophonist primarily, I believe, but you would see him on stage with his sax and his flute and his harmonica and his God knows what attached to him all at once, and actually I think that's what probably gave him his sound, his flute sound, because it's not a pure flute sound. And of course, he's using singing and playing and all the other weird and wonderful techniques, which you wouldn't. I doubt that anybody would come at that straight to the flute, if that makes any sense. It makes sense that somebody like that with the sax, which has that reed and has that kind of more resistance, you'd then think, oh, maybe I can get I would transfer that onto the flute, and the same maybe with the harmonica, that sound, that grittier sound. It makes sense that then came from somebody that played all those instruments already, because I don't think you would necessarily even think about wanting to do that with a flute until you'd done it with something else. I mean, thank God somebody did, because it's just magic, but yeah, no, that's interesting. And I think the people that haven't, if anybody hasn't heard Roland Kirk, just go and listen, because you can really see how Ian was influenced through that.
It's really interesting to listen back to back to Ian Anderson's Serenade for a Cuckoo, and then Rahsaan Roland Kirk's Serenade for a Cuckoo, and in that order, because otherwise I think you'll find it very depressing. But the the Kirk version is just so explosive, and I've never thought about what you just said. This idea that being a multi-instrumentalist, and really I guess you could apply this to any discipline or any set of disciplines, that the more different points from which you are coming at any particular thing can enrich what you can unlock from that individual thing.
I definitely, and it's the whole melting pot of stuff, isn't it? I mean, I having been on this journey myself as a musician, from, like I say, being kind of strictly a classical player but a lover of all these other things, and then now opening up my musical world and allowing that to happen, as a player, it's so, not only is it liberating, it's just, you learn so much from each thing, whether that is a different instrument or a different genre or a different whatever, and I just wish players and musicians of every genre would do that. It doesn't mean they have to go and perform in that, but go and try it and learn something different. And I think that's what is magic about musicians like that, Roland Kirk, Ian Anderson. They're open to doing it, and they're open to discovery. I'm a great believer in discovery. I say that all the time with my students. Discover what's going on, discover what your instrument can do, discover what you can do, make it individual. And that again is, to me, is a massive draw to Tull and their approach, because it's just, they're not afraid to try stuff. It's free, and yes, all right, there may be some element of manufacture going on at certain points, because it's the music business, but I don't think they've ever lost that. So yeah,
it's interesting hearing about your journey, sort of starting from the classical training standpoint and then getting into rock and roll. Ian's trajectory has almost been the opposite. He started playing rock and roll. The story that we've always read is Ian was in a pawn shop, I think, either getting his guitar back after having sold it for beans or something, and saw a really inexpensive flute and thought, yeah, I bet I could play that. Picked it up, and that was it. And from there, if you jump forward a number of albums, we're right in the period now where the story is his daughter was about 13, 14 years old at the time, started taking flute lessons. And he would say, oh, let me show you how to do that. And she was like, Daddy, that's not how you play that note. And he was like, oh, maybe I have something to learn. And he sort of started at that point learning more of the classical technique, more of the quote unquote proper way of playing, which you can really hear in the later albums. I was just listening to .com this morning.
You can hear it and you can see it as well, because some of his finger positions and some of the actual notes as well, so he always go down about the pinky finger, so he would never use this key here, which doesn't, I mean, if I'm honest, it doesn't make a massive amount of difference to many of the notes, but some of them it does in terms of intonation. So he started using that a lot more. And there's one note that notoriously gets played incorrectly, which is F sharp, which sometimes gets played with the middle finger. The correct fingering is really that finger. So you can see that as well. He's
Wow.
He's kind of switched that, but it's I mean, massive respect for that, because it's so difficult when you've learned something one way
Oh
to
my
then,
gosh.
relearn it, unlearn it. So yeah, that's huge. But yes, I've noticed that watching videos from different periods.
Claire, have you heard the piece Grimanili's Lament?
Lament.
Grimanili's Lament?
Yeah, beautiful.
Absolutely
Love that
stunning.
piece. Yeah.
What was that? Was that .com or was that Rupee's Dance? I think that's
No, it's
right.
it's Secret Language. Or no, it is Ruby's Dance. It's
Yeah,
Ruby's
it's
Dance.
Yeah, it's on. Yes, yeah, yeah,
technically a solo album, but
yeah. Oh, it's just beautiful.
I read a very funny I think it was actually when I bought the CD of Ruby's Dance. Ian had written, Grimanili was this famous flautist and he died, and I wanted to write this lament for him. And then it's a duet because it's a tribute to that flautist and kind of my relationship with him. And so initially I was going to have I forget his name, something. There's a famous American flautist. His name has gold in it, something Goldman. Anyway, he said I was going to have this famous flautist play the other part of the duet with me. And I thought, well, no, I'll have this other famous flautist play the duet with me. And then they both were worried that the other one was going to get it. And so instead, I just did it all myself. It's just the most kind of Ian Anderson story.
mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so.
Brilliant. I didn't know that one. I did not know that one.
So you said you were able to visually see like that kind of progression of Ian's playing. Can you hear it too? Do you hear when he starts to?
It's fascinating to go back to the early stuff and to just, I still can't wrap my head around that, the fact that he did Boré after playing the flute for 2 weeks or something stupid. Like, I mean, you can hear that. Technically, but it's all the better for it, in my opinion. It's because his sound it's thinner, it's not yet formed, it's not stable, there's not as much power there, but there's something really endearing about it. And not saying that there isn't now, there still is, obviously there is now, but there's just to hear that progression. And I think, again, a lot of musicians can learn from this. Just go out and be you and make a sound and play the music you want to play. It doesn't have to be technically, superior or technically amazing or whatever. I mean, my regular live stream viewers will be laughing now because so I do a live stream show where I do requests every week, and never a week goes by where I don't mess something up completely. Whether that's because, I mean, now I've got like 140 odd requests, 140 odd tracks in my request list, because I keep adding stuff and making my own covers and things. And I just can't remember them all. I mean, some of them I have the sheet music for. I do have the dots in front of me. Some of them I make myself play by ear. Some of them, I know what key I've written the key down, but some of them I've just got lazy, basically. I haven't even written down what key they're in. I'm just like, right, okay, let's just play. And sometimes that's an utter disaster because I can't remember. Or I've got the dots in front of me and it's in the wrong key and I've forgotten to write, I need to play this in a different key.
Yeah.
So I mess up all the time. And at first that was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. As somebody who's, been trained to follow the dots and play it like this, and it was terrifying. And what it's taught me is it really doesn't matter. Because, and I'm sure my listeners again will be smiling, because my philosophy is, who cares? A wrong note, who cares about a wrong note? Who cares about that? It's how you play it. And that's really is what comes over in Ian's playing right from the beginning all the way through. It's full of him.
And you learn from that mistake too, right? I mean, you learn to better prepare. You learn to play the note differently.
You'd think you learn to better prepare.
It's not dissimilar to how we do Talk Tull, to me, to be honest. I mean, Omen writes the triptych in the beginning and I write some stuff for the end. But other than that, everything is off the cuff. We're really in a flow now that we really have it.
And we've always staunchly refused to learn from our mistakes.
Exactly. So that's why we repeat them every week.
But sometimes don't you think, it's the mistakes that people love. Like, it's because if we're going to go to a deep level on this, it's that humanness, isn't it? It's that vulnerability and that humanness. And I think in our society, if we want to talk about that, there is this want to be perfect. There is this want for it to be polished and to be like that. And actually, I think we all just need to be human, and show that. And that's the artistic, creative element, isn't it? Of just doing something and it being in the moment. I've learned so much from the streaming and just being able to enjoy the moment when I play rather than panicking, and thinking, oh, this isn't good enough, this isn't right. Well, that's it. If too much of that takes away from the actual doing, I think.
Yeah, excuse me a moment while I step up onto my granddad's soapbox, and I think this is kind of the problem with social media, Instagram, TikTok, of everybody gets the perfect version of something, and you never see the hours that people sink into it, the mistakes that they make. And that's why we are pro mistake. But also, it reminds me of another bonus track that we covered off of Heavy Horses, Quatrain, where Martin's ripping along. It's great. And Ian picks up the mandolin.
Oh, yes.
And you can hear him in the background. He's like plucking along. He's going great. And then you hear like, oh, fuck, again. And then he picks up again. And it's clearly like a literal off the cutting room floor. And he screws up twice, both times when he picks up the mandolin. And that's just that level of humanity, that connection with Ian is so much more valuable now than hearing these really perfected tracks. We have sunk in so much time into listening to those. It's getting to see the humanity that is Ian, especially because he's really reserved anyway.
Yeah.
So seeing how something can be personal, how this guy who has produced just hours and hours of material, done thousands and thousands of hours of touring.
And there's so much writing that hasn't been, for every one song that we hear, he's probably written 10.
Yeah, right. It's so important to actually get something that's worthwhile, I think. And for me personally, I really struggled with this. I mean, 2019 was the obviously the year before COVID hit, and it was the year before I really started doing any of this stuff online. And I'd got to the point where I was struggling to find places to perform as a classical player and do all this stuff, and really kind of at my wit's end a little bit, and I really had to go through that mentally and learn that, hang on a minute, unless I let go of this need for it to be a certain way and to have that kind of standard, which is really unobtainable, then I can't really keep going with this.
You just end up reducing the number of contexts in which you can perform.
Exactly.
Rather than having an expansive kind of perspective.
It's completely the opposite to what it should be like. But I think for classical musicians particularly, they really struggle with this. And I think if you can find a way of realizing what we're talking about, that what is important, what we actually after here, and that doesn't, like I say, it doesn't always mean you have to perform in a different genre, but I think trying other genres can help. Then you can just really completely change your world. When COVID hit, I started digging into that. Was when I started to improvise really and play around with stuff like that and actually start writing my own stuff. I'd never done that before. That was something that was just, I don't do that. I'm a player. You get put in a camp. When you're a classical musician, you get put in a camp. You're a player, you're a composer, you're a teacher, whatever. It gets very black and white. So, all that started happening at the same time I started to go online and try all this stuff, and it's completely changed how I am as a musician.
I think that movement towards specialization and kind of putting people in boxes is a little bit of a modern phenomenon. My parents are both scientists, and they've both spoken about how there are very few natural historians anymore. That when they were learning science, there were all these old, all the old professors wouldn't say, "Oh, I'm a behavioral biologist," or "I'm a chemical bonds person." They would say, "Oh, I'm a natural historian." That I practice natural history. I try to understand everything that I can about the natural world so that I can understand the whole of it and how it works together. And I think that Nick and I, part of the reason we focus so much on the lyrics rather than on the music, besides our glaring lack of actual talent and skill, is that our training comes from the theater.
Mm-hmm.
We both grew up doing theater. We met performing outdoor theater, and we both studied it. And so, that's kind of where we get our text analysis from.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that theater is taught nowadays is, well, are you an actor? Okay, but that's not specific enough. Are you a musical theater actor? Well, that's fine. But then what's your type? Are you this type of, are you a character musical theater actor? It's just like, why are we putting all these divisions?
It's so dangerous. I mean, I even now really, if people ask me what I do, I say, or I try to, I'm a musician.
Right.
Mm.
I don't, for a long time it would be, I'm a teacher. And then it might, I'm a singer, and then it was, I'm a flute player. I have a thing about flutists and flautists and all that stuff as well, which we can
ask you about that.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I'm very much now, I'm a musician.
That's great.
Because that should be the forefront of what you do. And I totally agree. It's really dangerous, all this boxing in malarkey.
Now, speaking of boxing in, something that I've been dying to ask you, I think I detect that perhaps you are English?
Yes.
Old claim.
Yes. Claim to be that. Actually, I do my best. What's it called? What's the term? Oh God, I don't know what I'm trying to say. The British way of speaking, actually, the very British.
Oh, received pronunciation.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. I can't even say the words, let alone do it.
So I wanted to ask, what part of England are you from?
So I'm from the north.
Yes,
I'm from Hull, or Hull, if you want to be posh.
Oh,
it's Hull, basically. Kingston upon Hull, which is in Yorkshire.
Right. So right. Where the puddings come from.
I've heard of all of those things.
Yay! Awesome.
Terriers and puddings, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, excellent. Yeah. So very proud of my northern roots, really. Yeah.
And that's really on the east coast of England.
Yep. Right
on the Euro side.
That's it. Yeah.
I'm English by marriage, and my wife's family comes from just about the same latitude, but over on the other side, so near Liverpool, in the kind of Ellesmere Port area.
Yeah, so we're pretty much level then.
Yeah, exactly.
Geographically, we're just 2 hours that way.
So are you more of a Tesco or a Sainsbury's person?
Can I say neither? Neither.
Okay.
Oh.
Where do you?
I say Aldi.
Aldi.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Do you have Aldi? They're a German company, I think.
We do. We have Aldi's up here.
Yeah.
But they're not. I wouldn't say that they have a dominant market position.
Right. Okay. So we have. Do you have tiers of supermarket?
I would say so.
Okay.
Yes.
So Tesco's fairly high. Tesco and Sainsbury's are fairly high up.
Okay. Fair.
And we got Waitrose is like, we don't have Waitrose in Hull. They're doing Beverly down the road.
So for American listeners, I would say Waitrose is probably Whole Foods. Tesco is Wegmans. Sounds like.
Okay.
Tesco is maybe on the same level of Wegmans, but Tesco is its own. I was trying to do this morning. I was like, what is the American equivalent of Tesco? And I thought
Trader Joe's.
The Spa. Yeah, maybe Trader Joe's.
It makes me laugh that you guys don't have Tesco's, because when I've been over to Thailand and over there, and even they have Tesco. They have a Tesco. It's called Tesco Lotus.
Oh, I would go to that.
I like the
version of Tesco.
I love Tesco Express.
Yeah. I've just literally around the corner from me.
Oh, it's amazing. So Tesco is there is something a little bit spa-like about going into a Tesco. I don't know what it is. Everything is just very clean looking. And when you go in, Nick, let me paint you the Tesco picture for you.
Tell me, I'm imagining it now.
They manage to. They're very well curated. So even when they only have a small amount of space.
You've not been to Hull, have you? Just trying to picture where these Tesco's are.
Generally, they're well.
Generally.
Mostly in London. Actually, I've probably
Beverly.
Right. Yes.
Beverly's the posh town next to Hull.
I see. But if they only have a little bit of space, they do a Tesco Express, which is just a little mini Tesco. Oh, it's so cute. Big
So
fan.
is that like the little corner stores you'll get in
Honestly, yeah,
your city?
yeah.
No, it's not like a bodega because it's clean and it's all very it's all branded.
But the same general idea is you pop in for you get there's only so much there that you
Overpriced convenience of the same thing
Exactly.
you can get in the supermarket, but just
Okay.
in the corner.
Exactly, but less local color than in a bodega.
Yes, less cats, fewer cats.
Fewer cats.
Okay. Do you, aside from your viewers on your channel, do you have anyone you can talk to Tull about?
Good question.
Excellent question.
In fact, it's funny you asked that. I turned up at an orchestra. So I play in local orchestra, and I turned up at rehearsal, and I had my Tull t-shirt on, and the guy behind me who plays the bassoon was like, "Oh, Tull," and started like it was showing me a video of one of the latest, from the tour that's on at the minute.
Oh wow!
So I found a little local ally in the bassoon player in my orchestra.
That sounds like a bassoon player.
Yeah, well, he's the bassoon and he's the dean of medicine at the university. So
this is something that we've always found really interesting about Tull is that it seems to appeal. The music seems to appeal to a really thin but broad spectrum of individuals. So on the one hand, you have a lot of Tull is about the very like working class, the working man's experience, working John, working Joe. That song is fantastic.
The panel beaters.
Exactly, the panel beaters. But then at the same time, Ian is so intelligent in the way that he uses language and the way that he constructs language and the kind of abstraction of thought that he writes rock and roll songs about, that you also get this very kind of intellectual enclave of listeners to Tull. I wondered if you have experienced that, or if you feel like different parts of Tull appeal to different parts of yourself, or
oh, that's a good question. Yeah, no, I think I think it's exactly. I think you've really nailed it there. It is this narrow, wide spectrum of people who fall into that category, who like to think about things and learn and explore the world, but at the same time are actually just quite happy to be here and moseying along, and yeah, I think it's all those things. I think it's all those things. There's definitely what intrigues me though is the ongoing love of Tull. I know there must be quite a few younger people who are enjoying the music as well. I mean, the latest album, it got to number 9 in the UK charts.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, and I know like it's not, album charts are not as what they were because of streaming and all the rest of it, but it got to number 9 in the album charts, and I'm like, okay, there is still a real interest in this, and it can't all be fans who were there on the day or people like myself who are kind of coming into it late or whatever. It must be the younger element as well who are discovering it. So yeah, there's a wide appeal, and I suppose you can be attracted, like you just said, really, to all those different things. All of them are not, just one of them.
One commonality, one common theme that we hear whenever we ask about people's jump starts, how did they get introduced to Tull? The standard story is, I borrowed or stole my older brother's or my father's record collection. And so there does seem to be an element of passing it on to people who are younger than you, or people of even a younger generation, and possibly
the younger generation now are discovering all this stuff. I mean, look at the Kate Bush thing, and all there's a want to, I think, discover this music because it's so accessible wherever, and it's creating a real interesting time for the music industry.
That's why we've started a petition on our website to get enough signatures to get a track from Under Wraps into the next season of Stranger Things. We've got
nice.
tens of signatures so far.
Well, I will go and add mine.
10 plus 1.
Yes.
I think I think media-wise, whether it's music or television, movies, I think right now, to a fault, even I would say that the organizations are trying to play to nostalgia, to some good ends, like Stranger Things was really groundbreaking and fascinating. They put Kate Bush back in, and like some things are just really tried and worn out already, and we don't need any more reboots. But the idea of searching for that next thing that people liked back then but hasn't been pulled back in, I think it's kind of the heyday for that. And I think we have some younger listeners to the podcast as well, younger than we are. We're not that young. I mean, but we're not. I mean, Omen's
Speak
18.
for yourself.
18, but we have some younger listeners. They're less rabid. They're less vehement and adamant about the content than some of our older listeners are. But they're out there. They're definitely out there. And I mean, my 5-year-old enjoys listening to Tull with me, and I sing Fires at Midnight to him every night for a lullaby. So and he sings along, and it's great. He knows all the lyrics to Fires at Midnight. So
that's very sweet.
Started young.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. My wife is not terribly happy about it, but at least I now have someone to share Tull with in the house that's not her. So.
That's another common theme. People who write into us say, "Oh, I'm so glad that I could now talk to you about Jethro Tull rather than bothering my spouse." You've saved my marriage.
The spouses should be writing to you and thanking you. This is
we haven't gotten those yet.
Yeah.
It's strange how dichotomous Tull is at times, when I feel like they're not, and this is coming from someone who's loved Tull since I was 13 or 14, but I feel like they're not that offensive compared to some other bands, but like you either really like Tull or you really don't like Tull. There's not like, I could, unless it's people that are like listening to Locomotive Breath for the 3,000th time on classic rock radio. They keep it on the station, but that's about it. They're not gonna hunt down Tull. It's this weird.
And I wonder if that's because they have an impression that it is rock with flute. They think they know what it is,
right?
Something like Locomotive Breath or Bore or whatever. They think they already have this impression. Oh, I'm not going to like that because that's what it is.
I've wondered occasionally if the use of flute, and it's all a moot point at this point, but if the use of the flute in a flute point, if the use of the flute in Jethro Tull did, for most audiences, put it into a niche. Because it's at the same time, like they say, like Gypsy Rose Lee in the classic musical Gypsy says, you've got to have a gimmick, and in a way, I think the flute is the gimmick. It's the hook of Jethro Tull. Oh, it's rock and roll, but there's a flute. And then at that point, I think people who haven't heard of it say either, oh, that's just weird enough that I'll have to listen to it, or that sounds completely naff. I believe, to use an English expression.
Because we're very quick, aren't we, to put things, like we've talked about already, we put things in boxes. We put instruments in boxes. The flute is a classical instrument and it sounds like this. And that's really where my philosophy on my channel is coming from, because I love to play that, but I also love to play Tull-like stuff. I love to play pop stuff. I love to play, I beatbox with my flute as well. So I do, all that kind of stuff. So it's really showing what you can do with different instruments, and again, it's why I love Ian's attitude was, oh yeah, I think I can play that. He never even stopped to think, well, this is a flute, like it doesn't belong in a rock and roll band. He was drawn to it and it worked for him, so he made it work. And that's how we should look at instruments. They should be, what can we do with this, and what music can we make, not this instrument makes this music.
Somebody said at a conference that I was at one point, we often have the the tendency to think that we need to be at the service of music. But
Mm.
that is not actually how it is. Music exists to serve humanity.
Mm.
And so whatever tools are at our disposal to create music that serves us, that is how we need to be thinking about music, rather than, oh, well, 100 years ago or 200 years ago, this person put this note on a page, and so I must respect it.
Yeah.
It's kind of the debate that we saw. As a flautist, no doubt you are familiar with Lizzo.
Oh, yes.
Mhm.
She's caused all this.
You can't really, can't not be familiar with Lizzo at the moment, which is wonderful. I mean, I'm just,
Yeah,
it's so
she's
interesting
fantastic.
seeing people's reactions to that. It's
Well, and she's
Oh.
caused a lot of old white men panic in the last
yeah.
week or so because she
Yeah.
played some racist president's old flute.
Yeah.
And played the crap out of it.
Oh
Played
yeah,
it.
and the thing that people might not realize is that, without going into too much detail, because of the instruments we play have keys, they and they have a system connected to them which make them work. The flute she was playing doesn't have any of that.
Yeah.
Which means it requires different fingers. It requires a different way of blowing. It requires, basically, it's like this is a Rolls Royce and hers is a, I don't know, a Ferrari
Model
or a
T.
Lamborghini or something. I don't know, like completely different beast.
Right.
And the fact that she stood there and played the absolute out of it,
Yeah.
deserves so much more credit than she's even going to get.
She's also classically trained too, right?
Oh,
Isn't she?
yes.
Yeah, and I read an article that said she actually considered going to the Paris Conservatoire to study, and it would be the
Wow.
one question. Oh my God, if I got the chance to speak to her, I'd be like, tell me about that. Like, what made you not go? Because would she have the career she has now? Would she have gone down the classical route? I mean,
And
it's-
maybe she had a sense. I mean, Lizzo's a very intelligent woman.
yeah.
She may have had a sense. I'm speculating, which is what Nick and I do best. That maybe she did feel like, okay, if I go down this path, it is going to be a narrower and narrower path the farther down it I go. Whereas now she has one of the most expansive careers that you could imagine.
She does, and one of the most expensive flutes on the planet. Can I say?
Oh, really? Does she?
Wow.
Yeah, she earlier in the year, I think it was this year, she'd put on her Instagram about how she'd bought the flute from the Flute Center in New York, which is just a completely amazing, unique flute. And there was this little Instagram video of her taking it out of her case for the first time and like blowing one note and going, "Oh my God," like this, crazy, because she's such a flute geek. It's brilliant.
So cool.
But yeah, no, I completely agree with what you're saying. I just think it's so wonderful. But I'd love to know what her thinking was at that time, whether she had that awareness, like you're saying, or whether it was just I don't know what the reason was. But I think the world needs to be grateful that she didn't do it in that way, and that the world needs to catch up with that. That there is more than one way to be a musician, and more than one way to have an impact.
Exactly, and that's the thing. And just because she is an international groundbreaking pop star doesn't mean that she can't also be a really legit classical musician.
Yes.
And and that's, we often compare Lizzo to Ian Anderson on our podcast for more reasons than one, Nick. But it's sort of the same thing, that just because Ian is a groundbreaking rock star doesn't mean that he isn't also a legit classical flautist. That's been a later development. But
why can you just not play both?
Exactly.
It's such a simple question to me, and I don't understand why we are in these boxes. Because it's music. And it all really, what you need is an understanding of style to be able to play well in these different genres. It's not, yes, there's an element of technique, but like I've already alluded to, you can learn things, you can benefit from all these different things. And I mean, I personally feel there's too much of an emphasis on perfectionistic technique in the classical world and not enough emphasis on the music. And maybe if the two worlds were to collide a little bit more, everybody would be better off. I don't know, who am I to give my opinion? But I don't understand why there has to be a segregation. I really baffles me.
One thing that we often talk about, because we take more of the narrative analysis approach to Tull, is how the different music and the different musical styles serves whatever story is being told. If we can figure out what that story is, which sometimes is a struggle. But one thing that I've noticed, I had the pleasure of working with an opera this past summer, and one of the things that struck me was how rigid some of the performers, not even so much the performers, but how rigid the culture around performing opera was, in the sense of, well, the music is like this, and so we have to do it exactly like this, rather than, what the hell story are we telling here?
Yeah.
What is the story?
Can I ask
of
if it was
Carmen?
was it a piece from like the repertoire of opera, or was it a newly commissioned?
No, it was Bizet's Carmen.
Oh, okay, right, yeah.
And right.
Yeah, you've got no leeway with that stuff. I mean, when I was in university, that was my aim. I wanted to be an opera singer, believe it or not. I'd kind of ditched the flute. This is my story. So I got to university as a flute player. I'd actually sung more and technically had a higher grade in singing, but I wanted to go as a flute player. My roommate, I thought at the time, was amazing. I was like, oh, but she's so good and I'm rubbish. So I switched to singing. And kind of fell in love with it, and decided that rather than being a teacher, I wanted to be an opera singer, and I pursued that for a long time. And yeah, it is all about, it has to be a certain way. Like, there's no leeway. The way you pronounce the words, the way the music is done, everything, it has to be a certain tone. It's so precise.
Even beyond that, when it comes to the design, the production that I was in was trying to do a more updated design. They were trying to give Carmen, who is murdered by an enraged ex-lover because he can't wrap his head around the fact that she doesn't like him.
Spoiler alert.
They tried to humanize her and give her some dignity, and they had her wearing jeans for most of the production. And
we've modernized it because they're wearing a pair of jeans.
The reviewers went bat.
Really?
They went nuts. They were like, and it was fascinating, because it revealed so much about the culture of the people who were reviewing it.
Yes.
They're one of the consume opera specifically.
Yes, and just the general industry around it. One of the reviews was literally, I mean, just shy of saying, "I paid to see a slut, and I want to see a slut, damn it," And they were complaining like, "Oh well, they've sort of made Don Jose the bad guy." It's like, the guy who murders the lead character on stage. Yeah,
it's her fault, Omen. Didn't you realize that? Yeah, it all boils down to, I think, what really one of the big complaints about Under Wraps is, if you want medical precision in what you're doing, you program the drums on a machine. If you want feeling, you do something else. You get a human drummer, you get a band of people together, you get feeling. But that's not like the case of opera or the classics. They want, this is how it's been played for hundreds and hundreds of years. This is how we want to hear it. This is the reason I'm going to that. And that's the reason the world's in the situation it's in, is because we're carrying through with tradition. Sorry to get political, but
no, yeah, I would,
But also with Under Wraps, it's interesting, going back to the other side of that, is, in that case, does the drum machine serve the story, this kind of Jean le Carré spy Cold War narrative? Does that serve it better, perhaps, than a live drummer would? Or does it all not matter, because in fact they did use the Drumatron instead of, is it all just a moot point now?
It's a rhetorical question until we get that remaster where we get an actual drummer on there.
Actually, I heard of an opera that used robot singers. This is not a joke. I know that most of the things that I say are nonsense, but this is a rare moment where I'm saying something that is real. There's a new opera where some of the performers are human and some of the performers are giant robots that come out and make sounds.
Heard of that?
Make sounds.
See, that I could really go off on a tangent about opera, but yeah, that to me almost smacks of, oh, we're going to do this thing because it's going to be so new and edgy, and again, like you're saying, it's not. Where is this coming from, really? Does it actually serve what we're doing? No, probably not. It's just a gimmick. They would never say that, but really that's what it boils down to.
And then if it gets butts and seats, was it worth it?
Yeah.
All right, so Claire, there's something that I'm really interested to ask you about,
Okay.
and this is something we talk a lot about on the Talk Tull to me. The question of a concept album. So this is something that is a little bit of a fierce debate within the Tull community about, is it a concept album? Is it not a concept album? Where do you draw the line? What does that even mean? And I'm really curious, what your experience of listening to Tull with that is. How much does that factor into your consciousness? Is there a difference between big C concept and little C concept?
Oh, well, I mean, I would define, if you had to push me on a definition, I would say it is a strong thread that runs through the whole album.
Sure.
And I think that's where, I mean, I've heard Ian say he's quite adamant on something like Aqualung not being a concept album because it only, there are a couple of songs about this, there's a couple of songs about that. I think the other thing is it's really the whole, it's a package, isn't it? It has to be a whole package. I mean, like Thick as a Brick is one whole long thing. So I mean, there's no really way of getting out of that. So there are different degrees, aren't there? I mean, like you said, the big C, the small C, there are different degrees. I think at the end of the day, does it really matter? Does it really matter? I think we've got so used to now albums of the past 20 years or whatever just being a random collection of songs. I mean, most albums are not even, thought through beyond that. The title just doesn't even have any resemblance to any of the songs sometimes, if you look at some stuff. So I mean, in terms of, I mean, I really like the concept of concept albums. I think it helps to see where the artist was coming from. I really like, to really look at that and to get their take on it. And if there's a story, great. Or if there's just a theme, great. So I don't know. I think people cause too much worry. They bother themselves too much maybe about it, because at the end of the day, you've got your interpretation of what the artist's interpretation is,
right?
Which is your interpretation of which is why I find you guys fascinating, because you do really look at that and you do talk about that. You say, well, this is what I think he meant, or this is what, because that is all we've got, isn't it? And that's all we should have, because as an artist, and I know as somebody who's a prolific composer that I am, I know as somebody who's released bits of my own stuff. It is some of it is personal, some of it is not personal.
Right.
Some of it's coming from a direct influence. Some of it's coming from not. I mean, that's the other thing about Ian talks about, isn't he? People bang on about, it must have been this point in his life and this experience, and he's like, no, I just like watching people, Yeah.
He is a people watcher.
I think my real take on that is that I don't think we have any. We don't have any right to know, really, and we don't need to know. We don't need to know, because your interpretation of the music is what's important.
Right. In a sense, it's none of our business.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's nice to speculate, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. But I think the fact that we form our own opinion on it is what's important. And I know somebody's released stuff, I really have to. I don't care if people like my music. That's good. I don't care. I really don't care. What I care about is the fact that I've done it and I've enjoyed doing it, and I want to share it. But if people love it, that's a bonus.
Yeah.
And whatever people think about it is none of my business, really. And I think that's true of all art. So
one thing that's been interesting, kind of studying this, the last 50 years of rock and roll through the work of Jethro Tull, is seeing how the change in the way that we listen to music as consumers. In the early days of Tull, the vinyl record makes for a very curated experience in a way. You can only listen to the tracks in a certain order. You are forced to participate in the music by flipping over the record. We've talked a number of times about the moment of the flip and how that kind of implicates you in the story sometimes. And now, it's, we're in the Spotify land. So if you don't like a song after the first 10 seconds, you skip it. Which in a way is fantastic because
which is going to be difficult when songs are only 16 seconds long because they're all on TikTok.
Yeah, it is. It is.
There's going to be no song left if you just.
In order to go for a half-hour walk, you have to have 3,000 songs left. So there. But that's something that right now, in terms of where we're recording the Tull albums, we are Under Wraps was the first Tull album released on CD. And so we're right at that point when things start to fracture. And even with the release of that track, we've talked about this in recent episodes, how the vinyl was released with this order of tracks, the cassette tape was released with a slightly different order of tracks, and the CD had a couple of extra tracks dropped right in the middle.
Yeah.
And so it's like immediately you have this fracture of what the listening experience is. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And it's so easy to forget all that stuff, but it's so important because it's massively affects how we hear things and interpret things and how we consume things, and what you were saying about the vinyl and having to turn it over and all the ritual stuff that went with really listening to music and having to make that effort to listen to it, I grew up in the CD era, but even that, we had the CD and we had the artwork and we had the lyrics on a piece of paper. And
that's huge. That's something that,
I
it's
really
funny.
feel for people that didn't grow up with any of that. It's kind of makes me sad.
Even recently, Spotify has started adding in lyrics to the song, so it kind of scrolls along with it as you're listening sometimes, depending, but it's not ubiquitous. But I wonder, have you gotten kind of into the resurgence of vinyl movement?
No, well, I've got some vinyl at my mum's house, actually. I'm going to retrieve it when I get some space. But yeah, I do have a small vinyl collection. Now, I inherited my dad's stuff, so I've got a lot of Beatles stuff that was my dad's. But I haven't got my mum keeps saying, you can have a record player. And I'm like, yes, I know. I just need to actually sort my house out so I can set it up. But yeah, no, it's something that I'm almost holding off doing it because it's something I want to do as I get older, like have that, start to build that little thing. So the answer to that is yes and no, but it's something I want to get into because I can understand the magic of it.
Yeah, I only just got into vinyl in the last 2 years, I think. And when you say the vinyl experience, 100% is it an experience. If you don't have the mindset or the time to dedicate to, or the volume, to be honest, to dedicate to listening to a vinyl, it's not worth it. I'm in the same room all day as my record player when I'm at work, but I can't have it loud because I'm on phone calls. So it's not worth listening to because I hear the little bit out of the speaker, but I hear it coming out of the record player itself, but it's off by 3 seconds. You can't really absorb it. I'd rather just put on Spotify, to be honest, at that time.
Yeah.
So I recommend once you can set up a space in your house dedicated for that, that's the time to really get into it.
What I'll have to do is get rid of all my sheet music and just ditch the dots and get the vinyl instead.
That's right. Yeah. A vinyl-torium. Speaking of classical music, one of the things that I've really appreciated over the last year or so is getting classical music on vinyl, because so much of any music, but classical music in particular, is the context. And so having a full, foot by 12-inch by 12-inch block of text, giving you the context, giving you the history behind, giving you the history of not only the composer, but of the players and of the recorder, the context of the recording, deepens for me the appreciation and the understanding of what's going on in the music, rather than just, yeah, it's an orchestra doing some stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which is, completely what you don't get with the streaming experience.
Totally. And I think why people increasingly shy away from classical music because it seems like, oh, you have to understand so much. Well, yeah, maybe you have to understand some, and if you just have that, if you physically have that information with the actual device that you're playing it on, it helps.
Yeah, definitely. It's we forget how much we have lost. Actually, with the convenience comes loss.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's there will be a day, I'm sure, when the convenience and all these things can come together. But until that day, it's we're in a funny time.
Yeah. How quickly technology and the advent of new things really just come into culture. Stuff gets left behind so quickly. But like we said earlier, that nostalgia culture, I mean, people younger than we are buying vinyl. Bands, present day bands are putting out vinyl.
That's
You know,
right.
it's there. It's coming back. It really is. And I think with that, those darn kids who were raised to consume media in a different way are starting to realize that. And that's why vinyl is getting bigger, is because there's a new way for them to appreciate media.
Yeah.
And that's kind of I think ultimately what hipsters are. It's like, this is how we can appreciate these things, whether it's vinyl or a penny farthing. That's and mutton chops.
Nick hasn't left his house since about 2008, so this is why.
There's just a pile of
don't leave your house. The world is a weird place.
Yeah.
Don't.
Those were my cultural references for everybody. So
Right.
yeah, I'll check out now.
Well, and the flip side of the technology shift is that now we have the ability to create these communities around things like Jethro Tull and connect people who didn't have anyone to talk about these things, and try to create a space where we can discover some of this context. I mean, one of my favorite things, unexpected, but the most unexpected discovery about Talk Tull to me was that anyone listened to it. That was a real shock when we realized that people were actually tuning in. And we would be totally happy to just go on and do the entire thing without anyone having listened to it.
We started it on a lark. We knew full well it was going to be so crazy niche. We didn't have any expectations.
Yeah.
But I'm disappointed, frankly.
It's the best way, isn't it? It's the best way, because it's absolutely genuine. You know, that comes across.
And the thing that's been fantastic is having people write in and say, "Oh, hey, I was at this tour, and by the way, when they reference this thing in the song, there was a set piece that went along with that." And it's one of those things that we would never know because we weren't alive in 1981. And unless we did, unless we were actually biographers or had watched every frame of footage ever taken of Jethro Tull, you just wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, the information that you can find on anything is incredible.
Yeah, it's out there. I mean, if we were full-time, we refer to ourselves as amateur Tolkiologists sometimes. If we spent all of our time scoring all of these resources, that we could probably have a much more informative and much longer podcast. But that's the beauty of this community that we've built. Also the Discord that we have, if you're a $5 a month Patreon patron, we have these people writing in and saying, "Oh, I was there for this. This is what this means. This is this." So we have this collective kind of Tull Skull hive mind, and it's so remarkable and it's so sweet, and we've really gotten to know these people, and it's something we never ever expected.
Yeah,
it makes me.
Because then it goes from being what you started it to something else. I found that completely with my community as well. Is that I just wanted to play. I just wanted to have a regular outlet to play, and if it was going to be online, so be it. It had to be online at the time I started it, and it's now become this little community. And we share stuff every week, and we have our own little things going on, our own little quirks like you guys do, and it has become about that, the sharing and the community and the just love of learning stuff, which again blows my mind. I would never have thought that people would ever sit and watch me for 2 hours on a Sunday.
Yeah.
2 hours. Who wants to? I've been teaching all day by that point as well. So God knows and what comes out my mouth, but people do. They like they like watching me for the whole 2 hours. I imagined it'd be, people would come in for 5 minutes and go, "Oh, can you play this song?" Yeah, all right then. But no,
Well, it's either that or they turn on the BBC and hear what's happening in the world.
Yeah, you see, that's it, isn't it? Yeah.
Now, speaking of playing the flute, you have a flute there.
I do.
I imagine we're getting close to the end of our time. Do you want to take us out with your favorite Tull piece?
Ooh. Well, what's the one that you always have at the beginning?
Oh, beret.
It's beret.
So maybe
the
we
classic.
can have a little bit of beret because
Yes.
you guys always have it at the beginning. Do you have it at the end of your episode?
Yeah,
You
it's
do,
it's the first like 15 seconds of it in the beginning, and then the final closer as well.
Got it. Because
What do
I
you mean the
always
final
do.
closer?
I tend to always do. Don't always. It depends on time. But I normally do beret at the end. So my little tag at the end is, I've got to remember this because this is quite new. I came up with this a while ago and went, oh, that's rather good. I'm going to stick with that. To finish off our music making today, here's a little bit of beret, you see. So there we go. And
Does everybody yell at the TV
well,
when
they
you do
might
that?
do, but you see, I can't hear them yelling. They might be yelling, but who knows at my end. So yeah, we can do it. We can do a little bit of that. Totally messed that up at the end.
Brilliant. Absolutely lovely.
And what I do now like to do, because I do that one, I had the dots at first, and now I've played it that many times that I know it.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, because I did my own cover of it and I used that as the backing track. And so the ending, of course, is just crazy, isn't it? It just goes off on one.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, I hadn't left enough of a gap at the end to do like a crazy ending. So then I had to add in all this extra space. So now the ending can be really long or it can be really short. Who knows? It's just whatever comes out of my brain at the time. So if you want to hear that, tune in or go and look at the latest one from last week. So yeah, I love that. And I said when I did that cover, it's still one of my favorite things that I've ever covered.
Yeah.
Because there's something about playing it that I will never get bored of.
Mm.
You know, and when it gets to the bit in the middle, that bit. And now I know it. I can play it in different ways, and it's like, oh, it's a dream. You know, I never get bored of playing that.
What an insight! What an insight into Ian's mind, even just throughout years of him playing, and like just hearing various live albums of their different iterations of
exactly. There are so many different versions of it, and every time I listen to a different one, I'm like, ooh.
You may already be aware of this, but there was a duet between Ian Anderson and
Katie Coleman.
Colonel Katie Coleman, the NASA astronaut.
Yes.
And she played half of beret in space.
Yeah, it was
and
cool.
It's just, for me, that's such a cool, like, wow, from Blackpool, from the clubs of Blackpool to outer space.
Incredible.
The journey of the music is just, it's just amazing.
Yeah. And for me as well, that tune of course sums up the fact that it's a classical tune that he's taken and made his own. You know, that is, there's nothing more to be said. You know?
That was maybe the first Jethro Tull song that I ever heard, and you know, I was a dweeby weirdo kid who Nick can confirm, who, you know, didn't have a really standard upbringing, didn't have much connection to popular culture. I mean, I hadn't really even heard a lot of rock and roll when I was like 14 or 15. And I had heard a lot of classical music because that was a lot of what my parents listened to. And so when I heard Beret and I heard him start to, you know, do the flutter tonguing, do the throat singing, start to break it down, I was like, oh, what is this?
I feel tingly.
And that was, you know, that's kind of my jump start in a way.
Yeah, I mean, Tull is a cool stepping stone if you can get into it. It's great. Again, it has that divide and there's kind of that preconceived notion of prog rock, but like it really brings people together.
And for some people, it's a stepping stone into the past, and for some people, like myself, it was a stepping stone into the present.
You were one step closer to the present, at least.
Always one step ahead of the past.
One step beyond. So, is there anything you guys would like to quiz me on? Is there anything, you know, Britishism or fluteism that you've come across that you've still not answered in your time on Talk Tull to me? Is there anything that you're still kind of puzzling about that I may be able to shed some light on? Or
our listeners are very comfortable with writing in to say, "You idiots! How could you possibly think that this is what?" I remember the one that I felt the most embarrassed about was, I forget the song, but there's a reference to a Lou en suite.
Oh yeah, that was Living in These Hard Times.
Right.
So also a Heavy Horses bonus track. Wow. Go
Right.
back to that era, people.
And instead of hearing Lou, i.e. bathroom, en suite, i.e. connected to the bedroom, which should have totally been obvious, I heard it as a Luan suite. Luan is a building material that is very common in theater production. I was like, oh right, it's a suite made of Luan because they didn't have the appropriate materials to make it the right way. And one of our writers wrote it was like, what in the hell are you thinking?
I wanna throw in there. I did get Lou en suite, and Omen was like, but I think it could be this.
You were like,
yeah, but that's the beauty, you know, the language, the specific language parts aside, like that's the beauty of the personal interpretation. Ian has come out many times and said, interpret it how you will, you know.
Actually,
so that gives that gives Omen permission to interpret it as Luan suite.
Here's one that came up recently. So the first track off of Under Wraps is Lap of Luxury.
Mhm.
And one thing that we kind of stumbled over a little bit is the line, and the gaffer is a man of substance, drives a jag and takes high tea. So there's a lot in there to unpack. And I think most of it we feel fairly confident about. But the term gaffer, I was wondering if you could expand upon what that means.
I mean, you don't hear that term very much nowadays. You might still hear it in factories, but it's kind of the boss, but
right.
in the sense of maybe like a line manager. So somebody in a factory, okay, is maybe the supervisor. You know, he's kind of the foreman, like the little boss. So he's in charge, but he's maybe not the top man. Although in that context, when Ian was talking about it, he probably was referring to the top man, because then he goes on to talk about the Jags and things. But a boss, definitely a boss. I would see it as somebody who's a little bit maybe above themselves, because they're like, yeah, I'm in charge of you, kind of thing.
That makes sense.
I think that's what we ended on, right?
I think that's what we ended on. I had also posited, or someone had posited, that it might be an older term originally meaning father, like gaffer and gammer.
Okay.
Yeah. Mother, father, grandmother, grandfather kind of thing.
Right.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Grandfather, gaffer.
It could, possibly. That wouldn't have occurred to me straight away. I would definitely go for the boss.
Yeah, that's probably even more antiquated than the boss term.
Yeah.
I guess the American equivalent could be straw boss. That's a
never heard that term before.
It's an antiquated American expression, Nick.
Oh, that's my time. I am an antiquated American.
You are. That was one that tripped us up. Also, I mean, the concept of taking high tea, we think we know what that means, but what does that mean to an actual person who lives in England?
So high tea, I suppose, it's interesting. We haven't talked about tea, which is like one of my favorite things to talk about. So we should talk about tea.
Let's do.
High tea is probably more like an afternoon tea kind of experience, an important kind of ritual that the upper class would take.
Ceremonial.
Yeah, I would say so. Whereas now we just drink tea all the time.
Right, Claire. What's your go-to brand of tea then?
So, my
PG Tips
will already know this one. Oh, PG Tips. Wash your mouth out.
Making enemies left and right over here, Omen. What?
Yeah. So there is only one brew for me, and that is Yorkshire tea, of course.
Oh, now do you drink Yorkshire Gold or Yorkshire regular?
You know your stuff, Omen. Well, no, I prefer the just regular Yorkshire.
Right.
Decaf when I have it later on, but normally I don't, because I run out of that, and then I just go back on the other stuff. So just the standard Yorkshire tea will do for me, but nothing else. Oh.
My wife is English and drinks a shocking quantity of tea. Maybe not shocking for you. I calculated out once how much tea she actually consumes in a year, And if you can visualize a 100-gallon fish tank, it's just about full.
Okay.
She drinks Twinings, and she's very dedicated to Twinings. But I actually prefer Yorkshire Gold. That's what her parents drink, and I've really got onto it.
Once you've drunk Yorkshire, there's no going back. Gotta be Yorkshire. Gotta be Yorkshire. Oh yes, I'm very, very strict on that.
Yeah. Nick,
Now, in the States, there's like, you can get any number of teas. You can get white tea, you can get green tea, you can get red tea, blah 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 blah. Is like tea for you, Claire, is like black
It's
tea,
what we'd call builder's tea. Have you heard of that expression?
yeah, a builder's brew.
Builder's brew, builder's tea. So this is your good old fashioned black tea with milk. You see, no sugar, no sugar.
Right.
Just black tea with milk. I do drink other teas, actually. I do have to admit that I do drink green tea and other bits and herbal tea and things. But this is what you need.
And not too much milk. A builder's brew implies that it's not overly milky, right?
Well, this is, you see, you could do. We'd need another few hours to talk about this, really. But yes, and then there's the whole debate of whether the milk goes in first or after, which again is a very
in first. Well, if you're making it in a pot, I guess yes.
Would you put milk in the pot?
No. I mean, but you could make tea in a pot and then put milk in the cup once you've warmed it, and then put the tea on top of that.
But if you put the milk in first, that's not good. You have to put the milk in after. Although I do always put the milk in first, but it's not the done way apparently.
I've never done that.
There's big debates about that. I have to admit, I'm not that fussy about the milk situation really, as long as it's got milk in it. But some people they're very fussy about that.
Now, Nick, nomenclature here. Technically, tea refers to the products of a particular species of plant. I forget the genus and species name, but it's something like Senecia. Anything else, any brew that is made from a different type of leaf is technically referred to as a tisane.
Correct. It's like calling almond milk.
Mm.
And I always call almond milk a spade.
Oh, don't humor him. These are the things that we edit out in the podcast and put in our outtake call to me. Give it to our Patreon patrons and just say, you don't have to laugh at this.
These are the jokes, folks. You don't have to stay for them, but here they are.
That's pretty much it, yeah.
So it's been a pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you guys. So interesting to talk Tull and flute and tea, of course, and everything in between. So thank you so much. And I'm actually I need to listen faster, don't I? Because I'm so conscious now of being behind with the podcast. And
just put it on 2x speed. Not only will you be able to listen to more of it, but the jokes will sound funnier.
I'll try that. Yes, because I need to catch up. But yeah, thank you so much, and good luck with all your endeavors in the future, you wonderful Feckless Momes.
Thank you so much, Claire. It's been really just a pleasure speaking to you. It's been a pleasure to flummox flute with you and to talk Tull with you, and to mash music with you.
Yeah, awesome. And you can we will have all the links to each other's stuff floating around underneath wherever it is in this technical land of ours. So go and check out Feckless Momes, and hope you've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.